Please, she pleaded. Don't do this. Diane stood in the corner of the kitchen, arms up in unspoken surrender. Jonathan, this isn't fair. Just put the gun down and talk with me. My arms stayed outstretched and still, the cold steel handle interlaced in my fingers. Her cries tore at my heart, but my mind remained unchanged. There has to be another way. Let's just talk, please. The revolver weighed heavily in my hand, the metal reflecting the fluorescent glow of the light above. I glanced down at the single bullet resting in the chamber, preparing to carry out its deadly purpose. This isn't fair, and you know it. We can figure this out. For the first time since I raised the gun, my arm began to shake. No, I thought, I'm going to do this. She deserves it. With that, my eyes rose to meet hers. As she saw my conviction, she let out one last blood-curdling scream as the bullet exploded from the barrel of the gun. With an eruptious bang, the back of my wife's head exploded in a fountain of dark crimson and bone. Blood splattered against the white backsplash, and her lifeless body crumpled like a sack onto the tile floor. My ears rang as the now empty gun clattered to the floor. I fumbled backwards, hitting the marble counter as my vision was obscured by tears. I loved my wife so much. She deserved this. She deserved to be free. My sobs echoed through the empty house, but not as loud as the undead moan that drifted in through the walls as they broke their way through the front door. There was music coming from somewhere deep within the incision, somewhere I could not reach, somewhere I could not see. You can't touch it, babe, Belle said, guiding my hand away from the wound. It'll be fine, I promise. You gotta let it heal. But I couldn't leave it alone. It was driving me mad. Every day, every hour, on the hour, I heard voices, music, and it was all coming from inside the cut. Then something changed. She heard it too. Leaning over me, Belle was changing the dressing when words began to emerge from the silence, taking shape slowly at first, then faster, faster. Opera music. She shrank away from me, clearly horrified. How could I blame her? She was shaking as she told me she was going out for an hour or so, that she'd be back later. I told her to take her time. I would have work to do. First, I locked the door behind her. Then I gathered a knife from the kitchen to open the wound. I removed my shirt and held the blade steady, prepared to make the first cut. It was like one particularly sick game of operation. Holding my breath, I pressed the knife's edge into my flesh, inserting it just deep enough to widen the edges of the incision. When I was done, my abdomen slick with blood, I reached in, prepared to finally meet whatever had been tormenting me for the past 3 days. There wasn't an end. To the inside, I mean. I reached deeper, deeper, felt nothing but wetness. I finally changed my position to where I could see all the way inside it. I rather wish I hadn't. All the possibilities, all the things it could have been. The loss of my own fragile sanity. A tool left inside me during surgery that inexplicably picked up radio interference was nothing compared to what was actually waiting for me. Moist pink lips, dripping saliva. Beyond that, an open black throat and a lashing tongue. It was a mouth. On a cliff top, overlooking a shallow pool, I met a man in a sharp black suit. It was unusual to see anyone in that peculiarly beautiful spot miles from town, and a difficult hike uphill. The man placed a big bunch of flowers down before he noticed me approach, then turned to greet me, his cheeks streaked with tears. "Didn't think I'd meet anyone else up here," he said, straightening his silk tie. "I lived nearby when I was a boy. We moved around a lot and didn't stay long." I asked who the flowers were for, and he thought long and hard before answering. But then he bowed his head, as if beaten down by something deep inside, and he decided to confide. I've never told this to anyone, and I deny it in a court of law. I told him I wasn't a cop. He chuckled and seemed more at ease. 20 years ago I was here with a school friend, he said. Mikey was a loner like me, from a broken home. We just bumped into each other whilst throwing stones down into that pond below. Two bored kids passing time one spring Saturday. The man picked up some pebbles and began tossing them off the cliff. You couldn't hear them splash as the water was too far down. Then we started shoving each other, back and forth, taking turns. It was only a game. We were only 9 years old. Folks don't let their kids play outside anymore. Ain't that a shame? I nodded politely. But I shoved Mikey too hard. He went right over the edge, the man said, tears spiking the corners of his eyes again. He didn't even have time to scream. I made the mistake of looking down at him briefly, and those 2 seconds have cost me a lot of sleep. Wincing, the man leaned over the edge. His body was crooked, like a lightning bolt, not enough water to cushion his fall. Sharp rocks had almost torn his arms off. That happened exactly 20 years ago? I asked. Not quite, he replied. 20 years and 2 days. That's what makes it murder. His deadbeat family didn't report him missing at first. By the time a search party arrived, they figured he'd only been dead for a couple of hours. If I'd only told someone what had happened instead of running off home scared and keeping it a secret, well, they could have maybe saved him. Is that so? I said softly. The man was peering down, perhaps seeing things which were no longer there. Animals started eating Mikey while he was still alive. 2 days he lay in the wind and rain, afraid. I can only imagine what that must have been like. You don't have to imagine, I said, shoving the man over the edge. He mustn't have had time to scream either. Then I took from my backpack flowers for my big brother Mikey, feeling like a great weight had been lifted from my chest. Don't worry, you're not going to die. I'm sure you're really confused about all this. Confused and scared. You're probably coming down with a killer headache, too. You can hardly see anything, and once this tape runs out, there'll be nothing but silence. But don't worry, you're not going to die, okay? As you've already figured out, you can't move. Those are leather straps holding you down, and trying to pry out will only tear away on your skin. Try and remain still, please. It's okay, you're not going to die. Do you remember how you got here? I'd guess not. You blacked out pretty badly. I asked the bartender to call a cab for you, get you home safely, and you did, eventually. I watched you struggle with the spare key for a while. Then I let myself in. You didn't even notice me taking your house key at the bar. You're probably starting to panic as you hear this, but I want you to remember something. You're not going to die, okay? You're not going to die. But you were drunk, all right. Just as drunk as that night, almost 7 months today. Do you remember it? You were heading home from the bar, just as drunk as last night. But this time you drove. Do you remember a flashing light coming over at a crossing? That light belonged to my son's bike. You hit it full on. Didn't even brake. I've been drunk a lot since then. I know how it feels. You probably couldn't even find the pedal. My son was thrown into the air like a rag doll and landed behind your car. But you didn't stop. You're remembering it, aren't you? Hell, maybe you're even regretting it now. Maybe you're begging.
No! God!
I'm not here. I can't hear if you are.
Please, no!
But I want you to remember what I told you before. You're not gonna die, okay? You're not going to die because my son didn't die. The doctors told me and my husband that his spinal cord was torn by the neck. They had done what they could, but he couldn't move anymore, nor could he talk. He couldn't even eat on his own. All he could do was look around. I still haven't been able to fully meet his eyes. It makes me an awful mother, and that's on me. But this is on you. That thing down your throat is a tube. It's connected to the same kind of nutrition that they're giving my son. You won't starve to death or be dehydrated. I don't know if you have family, never found out. But if you do, maybe they'll start looking for you soon. In a basement this far away from anyone, though, I doubt they'll ever find you. If they do, well, then you'll be alive to see. Like I said, don't worry, you're not gonna die. I won't let you.
No!